Guys, I'm really happy to welcome a new guest, Congressman Clay Higgins from Louisiana's 3rd District. He's a member of the House Freedom Caucus. He also serves on the House Homeland Security Committee and senior member of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee. You can follow him on Twitter at Rep. Clay Higgins. His website, clayhiggins.house.gov. Clay, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. It seems like every single day there's some new revelation about the Biden family, not just Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden and the kind of family operation they appear to be running. Let me start by asking you, what is the level of concern about all this on your part and also the part of your colleagues, Republican colleagues in the House?
Well, our concern is primarily focused on whether or not our executive branch is compromised in some way, and unfortunately, the deeper we go into the investigation, the more it appears that's very likely to be the case. I mean, Hunter Biden and his behaviors and his struggles in life are of zero concern to us congressionally. But the fact that the Biden family, who we now refer to as the Biden crime family, have no doubt, according to bank records, which are quite reliable sources of investigative material. According to bank records, the Biden family, including Hunter and President Biden, have been involved in receiving large sums of money from overseas nations in exchange for apparently the access to the power that Joe Biden had as vice president, and the concern now is whether or not that compromise and that behavior, that criminal behavior from years ago, has extended into a compromised executive branch for the United States of America, a compromised president, may I add, inaugurated president of the United States. So we're very concerned, Dinesh, that the evidence we're revealing is quite legitimately indicative of criminal behavior. But we're not interested in Hunter at all, other than by virtue of the fact that he was essentially the point salesman, shall we say, for selling access to his dad. And then the laundering of payment is where the rest of the family members got involved. So that they could disperse those payments throughout the Biden family in the effort to conceal that money. That's what we're revealing, and it's startling to observe. It's shocking.
Now, am I right in understanding that even though there's a lot of focus on Gary Shapley and the IRS whistleblower and the tax element of this, which is that all this money comes in, you don't seem to have disclosed it or paid taxes on it, the real issue here isn't just the taxes, it's the legitimacy of the transactions in the first place, isn't it? In other words, it's the idea that Joe Biden and the Biden family were selling something, and now the question becomes what? Right? I notice a lot of mainstream media are not covering this, but let's just say that they were to cover it. Can you think of a legitimate defense here? Could they say, you know what, we're not selling political influence. We're actually selling, I don't know, apples. We're selling widgets. Do they have anything else to sell?
It's an important point, Dinesh, because you have in any investigation, a criminal investigation, you have to take on the perspective of what we refer to as the reasonable man. So any reasonable assessment of the transactions that the Bidens were involved in, they were selling something, you're right. And the only thing they had to sell in these shell businesses that they set up, the shells were empty. It's why they're called shells. There was nothing there. It was selling they had no product nor service to sell. So a reasonable man would presume that and the corroborative evidence that we've observed from other sources, emails, telephone conversations, whistleblower testimony, the corroborative evidence seems to support the reasonable conclusion that they were selling access to Joe Biden. And that's it. I mean, he was a senator for a long time. And if you think about the access to information and the access to stakeholders and very powerful men and women across the country and indeed the world that a long-standing senator would have, and then look at the power he would have as vice president for 8 years, and now as inaugurated president of the United States, it's quite clear that Joe Biden has a tremendous amount of influence across the world, and it's quite clear that Hunter Biden and the rest of the Biden crime family had nothing else to sell to these nation states other than access to Joe Biden. And why would they want access to Joe Biden? Because of his influence. So that is specifically, that's influence peddling. That is it's against the law. And further, it endangers the stability of the United States of America and the integrity of our interactions with nation states across the globe that rely upon us for the integrity of our executive branch. And if our executive branch is indeed compromised, Dinesh, then Congress must act, and the DOJ must act, although we have very little confidence in this DOJ. They've been involved in concealing some of this stuff.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more from Congressman Clay Higgins. I'm back with Congressman Clay Higgins of Louisiana. You can follow him on Twitter at Rep. Clay Higgins. His website, clayhiggins.house.gov. Clay, we're talking about the Bidens and the Biden crime family, as you mentioned. Now, I want to highlight a couple of recently disclosed messages from Hunter Biden to Chinese entities. In the one case, Hunter Biden says, the Biden family is top of the line, I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting exactly, in being able to deliver what the chairman wants. Now, I'm assuming he's not talking about Chairman Xi, but the chairman of this Chinese entity, which is, of course, under the control of the Chinese government and the Chinese political forces. And in the second email, Hunter Biden is sort of trying to extract money, saying in effect, I'm sitting here with my dad, with my father, and you've made commitments and you better come through on these commitments right now. And if not, I will unleash, and my father will unleash our influence and our vengeance on you. I mean, this seems to me to be pretty close to a smoking gun, isn't it? I mean, Representative Claudia Tenney verified that this text was sent when Hunter Biden was at the Biden family residence. So Joe Biden was present. We don't know for a fact independently if he was in the room, but he was certainly on the premises. So how does one take something like this and then sort of nail it down by finding out exactly whether Joe Biden was there? Because that proves he was lying about having nothing to do. And I don't even know what my son's business dealings were. What are the next steps to be taken?
Well, clearly, it's a very incriminating piece of evidence, but it's one of many. And the defense that they seem to prefer, the Bidens and everyone that in the mainstream media that attempts to defend the indefensible, is that, well, Hunter Biden, those are the rantings of a disturbed, drug-addicted man. But from an investigator's perspective, you back up from all of that. You don't get emotionally involved in what the source of the evidence was. You look at what the results and the corroborative evidence. And in this case is the old saying of follow the money. So the rantings of a disturbed and troubled, drug-addicted young man that's making stuff up and desperately trying to seize influence where really none existed, if that was the case, then where did the millions of dollars come from?
I mean, we know for a fact that a few days later, $5 million plus moved. So in other words, it's not like the Chinese guy goes, oh, Hunter Biden is obviously on a crack spree. I'll ignore this message because he's obviously ranting and raving. He's not serious and his dad isn't sitting there. They obviously took it seriously because they paid up.
That's right. And this is what ultimately is going to force both the mainstream media and that faction of our country who seems to just refuse the gradually revealed clear truth about the Biden crime family and the fact that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, is compromised, and therefore our entire nation is compromised. What's going to gradually force people into acceptance of that truth is the documentation of money transactions. The Biden family had about 150 known suspicious activity reports. These are reports required by law to be generated by a bank that is federally insured. These are reports to the Treasury Department. If the bank independently observes a suspicious transaction of money that appears to be indicate money laundering or something like that. So most Americans will go their whole life, including small businesses moving large sums of money, sometimes would oversee vendors and contractors, and never receive a suspicious activity report. And so many of us didn't know what a suspicious activity report was. We didn't know what an SAR was until it was revealed to us that the Biden family, in a short period of time, just a few years, had received, that we know of, 150 SARs. Each of them are a significant piece of evidence to be observed and compiled to put the whole puzzle together. And the deeper we look at it, Ramesh, the more disturbing it is. It seems very clear that Joe Biden is a compromised president, and his family has been involved in laundering monies that have been delivered to them for years, millions and millions and millions of dollars through a dozen or more shell companies that were created to hide and launder that money. And why was that money paid? From countries like Romania and Ukraine and China. The only thing we can see that they were selling was access to Joe Biden.
Given the reluctance of the mainstream media to cover the story, is it not a fact that the only thing that forces them to cover it would be an impeachment proceeding? Because there's no way to ignore that if you're CBS or ABC or the New York Times. Republicans tend to be sticklers for, let's make sure we've kind of dotted every I, crossed every T before we take that kind of a step. What would you say is missing? What else has to come out? What more needs to be found to convince the mainstream of the GOP that, look, we've crossed the Rubicon here. This is the way to get this information out to the American people. We need to begin this proceeding, not just against Merrick Garland, but against Joe Biden.
Well, let me say I'm one of those conservative voices that advises caution regarding attempting to cross the threshold that was established by our founders to be the most restrictive process that we have access to. The impeachment of a sitting president of the United States was intended by our founders to be almost impossible. And the threshold that must be crossed is quite high, or should be quite high. And Republicans should be the party of constitutionalist principles. And therefore, I believe we should look to the Oversight Committee, as we're currently performing, to deliver a clear, calm, judicious assessment of condemning evidence. And this should not be rushed. It should not be driven by politics. And let me say that I agree that Joe Biden has committed impeachable acts. However, as a committed, principled constitutionalist man, I recognize that the impeachment of a sitting president of the United States should be a final exercise in that reveal. I do not think we should use the impeachment process through the Judiciary Committee to reveal the impeachable actions of our president when the Oversight Committee is effectively doing so. And that should be a timeline that unfolds according to the investigative process, not by dates on a calendar that reflect our election cycle. So I think we're in the process of both revealing the criminal behaviors of the Biden crime family and Joe Biden. And I believe we're also in the process of approaching November of 2024, where we'll be rid of Joe Biden anyway. So I think if we get to the point of impeachment, then our investigation through oversight will determine that on its own timeline. I don't think we should rush that timeline. I hope that respectfully answers your question.
It certainly does. Thank you, Congressman Higgins. I really appreciate it. Good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Dinesh. God bless you, sir.